I'm happy to begin if we'd like. It's 5:33, and let's wait one more moment for another minute for people to join. They might be coming in late. We'll be able to capture this a little bit later. So welcome one and all to tonight's World Affairs Forum presentation, Reimagining U.S.-China Relations with Earl Carr. It's a virtual event this evening, and we're happy that we can all be together, even if it is virtual. So, as you know, the World Affairs Forum is committed to connecting our community to our world, and we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to expanding the awareness of global affairs and America's role in the world. Membership, there are various levels of membership, and we encourage all who are listening, who are not members, to join us. They are several categories of membership. So have a look here, and any inquiries, please call our office and speak to our executive director, Jessica Anderson. And we want to, of course, thank our very important sponsors who are all listed here. I don't need to read off their names. You can see them all. We are grateful to each and every one of you for your support. Thank you so much. And housekeeping items, the session is being recorded, as I mentioned. Questions can be done, please, via the chat icon that you see at the bottom of your screens there. Just tap on that, type in your question, and it'll be registered. And if you would, please keep your microphones muted. We did hear some Irish ballads a few moments ago, but tonight we're dedicating to China. So please mute your microphones. Thank you. So I want to thank Jessica, first of all, and the entire team for all the hard work in organizing tonight's event. And I am so thrilled that so many of you have joined us for what will be an intensive look at China with our distinguished speaker, Earl Carr Jr. 6 months after the Shanghai Communique was signed 50 years ago, my father and mother were among the first 50 private US business people to be invited into the United Kingdom, to the Middle Kingdom, pardon me, the Middle Kingdom. And I followed 5 years later in 1977 for the first of my 76 trips to China over the next 30 years, as well as scores of trips to other countries in Asia, the subcontinent, and throughout Europe. But the China of today is vastly different from the China I knew, even on my last trip in the late 2000s. And so I am particularly thankful for the contributions of a new generation of thought leaders who invigorate our understanding of a monumentally complex nation in a world that is changing at lightning speed. And at the front of this vanguard is my friend and our speaker tonight, Earl Carr. Earl contributed to and edited the recently published From Trump to Biden and Beyond, Reimagining U.S.-China Relations. It's an encyclopedic exploration of a wide range of important issues facing the U.S. and China, bilaterally and multilaterally. It's a fierce tour de force that I encourage everyone to read. In fact, we're happy to offer it to our members and guests through Diane's books in our area. And we also have the capacity to include an autographed copy. Should you so choose, please just contact Jessica Anderson in our office. Earl Carr is founder and chief executive officer of CJPA Global Advisors in New York. He brings over 25 years of experience to guide the firm's practice and manage a multidisciplinary team of global geopolitical analysts, software engineers, and marketing and media specialists. A graduate of the College of William and Mary and American University, where he earned his MA. Earl also studied at Beijing Normal University, and he is fluent in Mandarin. And in addition, he is an adjunct professor, instructor at NYU's Center for Global Affairs, which is where we met a number of years ago, didn't we, Earl? Lastly, and I think very importantly and timely, Earl is a monthly columnist at Forbes.com. And 2 days ago, he published a granular look at China as Russia's backdoor to Western sanctions. So we are thrilled to have Earl join us tonight. And Earl, thank you for coming, and I'll turn this over to you.
Gene, thank you very much for that very extraordinary introduction. I've benefited greatly from our friendship, being both members at the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and I'm extremely grateful for you inviting me. Special thanks also to Jessica for your extraordinary preparations and organizational skills. The World Affairs Council, which was founded in 1946, a really unique 76-year history, and it's truly fascinating. And as I was going through the number of very prominent speakers, many of them who I know, such as Gillian Tett from the Financial Times, who I met at the Council on Foreign Relations, I just feel extremely honored to be able to be here today. So today I'd like to do two things. First and foremost, I have a poll, and I'll get into the poll in 1 second. But we have a poll that I'd love to do to be able to get a sense of what the members in the audience are kind of, their views and their perspectives on various issues. But before we take the poll, I think it's critically important to understand that whenever we talk about the relationship between the United States and China, China has always used parity with the United States, not only for legitimacy with the Chinese Communist Party, but for the modernization of China's economic development. You saw this parity in particular in the 1960s with China's desire to develop nuclear weapons. And now China has over 1,000 nuclear weapons. You saw this parity take place in the 1980s with China's accession into the World Trade Organization. And now you are seeing this parity play out in today with the realm of 5G and big data. I first went to China in 1998, where I was a young international student from the College of William and Mary studying at Beijing Normal University. I was on a floor with 20 other international students. And I'll never forget, there was one phone for 20 international students. Many of them came from Africa. And in 1998, when my sister gave birth to her first child, I had to wait an hour to use the one phone that was on the floor. And this is the days where you had to, push buttons with the phone, if you remember that. So I waited for an hour to call my sister and to hear my little nephew's voice for the very first time. Exactly 20 years later, I'm working in China, and I'm taking the high-speed railway. And I'm taking the high-speed railway from Shanghai to Hangzhou, and I'm using the Wi-Fi on the high-speed railway, and I'm using the Wi-Fi to get beyond China's firewall. And I'm using a phone that is being manufactured through multiple provinces all throughout China. And I think it's important to understand when you look at China and US-China relations to understand that that parity is critically important to a relationship that has always focused both on cooperation as well as competition. And so with that, I'd like to, Joe, if you can go ahead and start the poll, we will go ahead and take the first polling questions. So there are 5 questions altogether, and I'll read out the questions. For number 1, how do you perceive China's economic engagement in the US? 1, not concerned. 2, concerned. 3, very concerned. 4, not sure. Or 5, viewed positively. Feel free to take a minute. Question number 2, how do you perceive China's increased economic engagement globally? I.e. in the United States, other regions such as Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, etc. And I'll just go ahead and you all can read the questions. If any of you are joining us for the first time, please feel free to take the polling questions. Typically, we will try to end the poll when we have roughly around 90% of the participation rate. So feel free to take the poll, and we will go ahead and start the poll when Joe, you should be able to see the participation rate, the numbers as people are filling out the polling questions. So when you get about 90% participation, just feel free to just go ahead and let me know, and we can go ahead and just share the results. Wonderful. Okay. While you are taking these polling questions, what I have also done historically in the past is after we have gone through the presentation, we have also taken the poll again, just to see if individuals represented here have changed their perspective on various issues. I found that if the speaker is quite passionate or presents an overly constructive perspective with respect to US-China relations, this tends to skew you'll see different percentages change. If the speaker is a bit more pessimistic in the degree of US-China relations, you'll also see that reflected in a new poll. So just wanted to give some basic parameters of how this is has been historically utilized. Joe, how are we doing in terms of our numbers, our percentages in terms of participation?
We are at 58%.
Okay, 58. I know we can do better, World Affairs Forum. So I will. We'll wait. I know a number of people have probably just joined and just need a little bit more time. So take your time. When we get about 90%, we'll go ahead and go through these. I should also mention that I recently returned from the island of Jamaica, which is where my father and my grandparents are from, and saw the largest bridge that is currently being constructed by the Chinese, not only on the island of Jamaica, but probably the largest in all of the Caribbean. And this is very much in line with China's Belt and Road Initiative. I sent a picture to Jessica, and I believe she sent that to Jean, but sorry, I couldn't have incorporated that incredible picture in our presentation. But if anyone would like that, I can definitely send in an email. The other interesting thing that I'll just mention about the book From Trump to Biden and Beyond, Reimagining US-China Relations, is that it comprises altogether roughly 10 chapters and is written by 13 different authors. What's unique about this is that we've also been very intentional of trying to elevate the voices of a number of esteemed both ex-diplomats as well as scholars who are from various Asian countries and economies such as Japan, Taiwan, etc. And so that, within this book, we aim to get a really good perspective of how certain kind of, Asian scholars or diplomats have seen, the U.S.-China trajectory. I think I know Joe has mentioned that seems that we're kind of we're on 74%. I know some people.
We just got up to 80.
80. All right. Stanford, Connecticut. I think we can get. Can we get 85? Can I hear 80, 85, 86? All right. How are we doing, Joe?
We are 40 out of 50 people, 80%.
80%. All right. Can I hear 85? I always wanted to be one of those those commentators, like in when you're asking people to bid higher on various items.
An auctioneer.
An auctioneer.
Yeah, an auctioneer. I had a friend who did that, and he was amazing. He was incredible at being an auctioneer. It always sounded kind of fun.
Close, 82.
82. All right. Do I hear 85? Or at least 83? All right.
Can we answer twice?
Joe, what do you think? Are we still at 80, 82?
We're still at 82. And
Okay.
If anyone is having trouble or needs more time to vote, you can let us know. If not, we can close it.
Okay.
Everyone who's voted has wanted to.
All right, Joe. Yeah, I think it's fine. Let's go ahead and start. I want to be cognizant of people's time, and I know we have a lot to get through. All right. Wonderful. So let's look at the results of the poll. So how do you perceive China's economic engagement in the US? We have 5% not concerned. We have an overwhelming 46% concerned. We have 37% very concerned. We have 7% not sure, and we have 5% viewed positively. Okay, this is great. This is kind of in line with what I had thought, and this is also in line with polls that I have given at Georgetown University and a variety of other libraries around the United States. Historically, we get concerned as being the largest percentage. For question number 2, how do you perceive China's increased economic engagement globally? For example, in various other regions, Africa, Middle East, etc. 2% not concerned, 34% concerned, 51% very concerned, 5% not sure, and 7% viewed positively. Okay, that's a bit higher. We see more, a greater concern globally. And I think that, when you look at China's Belt and Road Initiative and various other initiatives, that there is a clear, I think, concern that some of, China's model, whether that be, particularly exporting, a model overseas is clearly part and parcel of China's strategy. Okay, question number 3. What issue are you most concerned about in US-China relations? A, potential military conflict in the South China Sea or Taiwan, an overwhelming 51%. B, stealing of intellectual property or cybersecurity attacks, close second with 22%. C, economic trade war adversely impact consumers in the United States, 12%. Rising popularism and nationalism in both the US and China, 10%. That's interesting. That historically, I've seen that as one of the highest percentages. Or last, E, China's tacit support of Russia, which could involve the US. So we see 5% there. So that's interesting. This is, typically I see 51% for military. I see a higher percentage for conflict in South China Sea, but also very high marks for rising popularism, D. Okay. Question number 4. What issue are you most optimistic about in US-China relations? A, the promotion of cultural exchanges between the United States and China. We have 34%. B, engagement on climate change and clean energy technology, 46%. C, engagement and cooperation in combating transnational crimes. We have 7%. Or D, we have provider of labor-intensive goods / services to American consumers at 12. So this is a popular one. We were just speaking about this earlier with myself, Jean, and Jessica. So 46%, also in line with a typical choice of, all right. And the last question, do you believe China will be the strongest global economy in the world by 2030? 27% said no, 17% said yes, interesting, 27% said not sure, and 29% said maybe. Now, this is interesting. Every single time I have ran this poll, yes has always been the majority. This is the first time I've ever ran this poll where yes was not the majority. So this is fascinating. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So now we will go ahead and get into my presentation. If anyone would like to have the results of the survey, please feel free to speak to either Jean or Jessica. I'm sure that we can have these emailed to you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my my screen right now. Please let me know if you all are able to see this, and I will just go ahead and share right now. Okay. So I think it's critically important. When I talk about the book, I think it's critically important to understand a little microcosm about where some of the motivations from this book came from. So on the right, you have a picture of my father. My name is Earl Alexander Carr Jr. This is my father, Earl Alexander Carr Sr. He was the former Jamaican ambassador to China and presented his diplomatic credentials to Chinese President Jiang Zemin in early 2002. On the left, you have my mother. My mother is Emily Sue Chen. My mother is originally from China, but born in Panama. So my grandparents are originally from Guangdong, southern China. And if I could summarize a story to share, which in many ways reflects the various cultures. When I think of this book reflects the various cultures that have defined both me and my life. And if I could, I'll share one anecdote. My father, I was in the 3rd grade, and my father dropped me off from school. And as you know, it's the end of the class, and my father came to actually pick me up early. And my father is a tall, imposing individual. He's about 6'2". And you know, my teacher at the time is a small, rather short nun, Caucasian nun. She's about 4'3". So my father comes to the door. I see my father as he is approaching, and I'm really excited to see my dad. It was the first day of school. You know, I was excited to see my dad. And as he approaches the class, my teacher leaves the class as she sees a tall Black man at the door. She approaches with a bit of intrepidation. And mind you, I am the only Asian-looking kid in the class. My teacher comes to the door, opens the door, and says to my father, "Sir, can I help you?" My father leans in and says to my teacher, "Good afternoon, I'm here to pick up my son." My teacher does kind of a double take. She looks at my father, she looks back at the class, and then she turns to my father and says, "Sir, I think you have the wrong class." I'm seated directly behind my teacher. I'm looking at my dad is looking at me. I don't exactly know what's going to happen at this moment in time, but my father leans in, looks at my teacher, and with an unwavering sense of confidence, says to her, "Ma'am, I know who my son is." As a 3rd grader, for the first time in my life, I realized that I was different. I realized for the first time in my life this thing called race, and the fact that my teacher could not decipher that this was my father based on how he looked and how I looked. And so what I find fascinating is that race does not dictate nor determine our character, but it often impacts our perceptions. And so I wrote this book in many ways to dispel the notion that China is this existential threat. That based on the fact that China has different values and different systems, that the two, United States and China, cannot coexist. And I think that it's really important to understand that dichotomy and where we are in this very unique inflection point in US-China relations. As I mentioned, there are 13 authors altogether, 10 chapters, which covers a variety of different regions from Latin America to the Middle East, to East Asia, to issues such as Chinese companies being delisted off the US stock exchange, etc., to Japan and the Quad. When we talk about China and China's geographic landscape, I think it's also critically important to understand what we refer to as tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5 cities. I've had the blessed and fortunate experience to travel to 27 of China's 30 plus provinces. And one of the things you will find is that roughly 8% of China's landmass is comprised of what we call tier 1 cities. These are the most developed cities such as Shanghai and Beijing. Roughly about 25% of China's landmass is comprised of what we call tier 2 cities. These are cities located in Shenzhen or Chongqing. Many people don't realize that Chongqing is actually the largest city in the world with a population of roughly about 30 million. And what has been fascinating is that for the last 10 years, China's tier 2 and tier 3 cities have been growing faster than China's tier 1 cities. And it's also critically important to understand that most of the economic innovation that is coming about in China is being developed in China's tier 2 and tier 3 cities. When we talk about opportunities, the US and China relationship has always been defined by opportunity as well as challenges. And when you look at economic opportunity, no other country on the planet has engaged economically in China the way the United States has. When you look at just one of the Chinese brands, it's called Shein. Now, if you're not familiar with this brand, you are most likely not a female and you are most likely not a teenager. Shein is the most popular teenage brand in the United States currently, with a company that's valued at almost 30 billion, and it is growing rapidly. And one of the incredible points that we talk about in this book in terms of opportunity is that when you look at the economic opportunities between the United States and China, it is critically important to understand that there is no notion of fundamental economic decoupling between the United States and China, because that would be catastrophic for both the United States and for China. And it's important to understand that dynamic. In terms of challenges, this quote, this was posted on Twitter from Li Jianzhao, who is the foreign press secretary. This was posted on February 24th, the exact day that Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, it's important to understand the context that, why would the foreign press secretary of China post this on February 24th? And I think this gets to the heart of where we are in US-China relations. I have never, in all of my 20 plus years of traveling to China, has ever seen US-China relations at such a low point. I think it's also critically important to understand that when you look at the news of, me and my colleague, Peng Yu, I have an amazing staff who we work closely together. And we were looking at the news of how Russia's invasion of Ukraine is being portrayed in the media in China. And as we were going through all the various search engines, we saw a number of things that were consistent patterns. The news in China consistently portrays Russia as the victim of the current Russian invasion in Ukraine, and it also portrays America as kind of the aggressor in the fact that the United States, in the enlargement of NATO, did not give adequate security concerns to Russia. And historically, if you read the Chinese news, they're consistently utilizing and painting, America as kind of the aggressor in this in the current conflict. So what have we seen when we look at what is going on in Ukraine in the conflict right now? You saw one of the most iconic pictures with President Xi Jinping and President Putin standing together in Beijing during the Winter Olympics, and that picture will not be forgotten for decades. It's important to understand that the fact that China in many ways knew about, there are a number of reports that indicate that at least at the highest level, President Xi was informed of the invasion, the upcoming invasion. It was also communicated that any kind of invasion would not occur until after the Olympics, Winter Olympics, because obviously from a national perspective, that would be very important to China. But what did we see? Roughly 48 hours after, you saw China and Russia standing together, and they defined this as a relationship, a friendship without limits. You also saw, it's critically important to understand that roughly 2 days just prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China signed one of the largest oil deals with Russia worth 175 billion. And that's also very important to understand. But what did we see roughly 48 hours after Russia's invasion of Ukraine? We saw clear limits to that friendship. Number one, we saw China at the UN Security Council. It did not vote utilizing its veto. It abstained. I think that is very symbolic, number one. Number two, I think it's also important that as the United States and its Western allies saw, a real united, clear stance against Russia, which we have not seen for decades. China started to appear. There were voices within China that were saying, could China possibly bear significant consequences for being on the wrong side of history and for aligning too closely with Russia? And I think the United States, most recently with the U.S. Security Advisor, with a 7-hour meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi, made it very clear. The United States made it very clear that China would pay for any of its Chinese companies that were found to be supporting Russia either militarily or giving aid. Those companies would be targeted. And so what did we see roughly about 48 hours ago? We saw the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index drop almost 11%. We saw other indexes take a huge nosedive, with traders really being concerned that actually China could potentially be targeted and wrapped up with a number of Western sanctions. You also have this taking place amongst the backdrop of one of the largest COVID surges in China. I mean, things are so bad right now in China, not since actually pre-COVID. I mean, I was speaking to a friend in Shanghai, and they are being advised not to travel outside of Shanghai. They are being required to test vigorously whether you have symptoms or not. And roughly they're seeing almost daily cases of roughly about 15,000 new cases. And we are talking about symptomatic cases. So it's really important that we understand that China is at a unique inflection point, not only having to bear consequences of of potential economic sanctions with what's going on with Russia, but also the fact that China's economy is slowing. China is now, they're hoping to achieve roughly about 5.5% growth in 2022. However, many economists believe that that will be unattainable given the current geopolitical environment. Next, I think I'd like to just share something important about Taiwan. There have been so many parallels between what is going on in Ukraine and what are the broader implications for Taiwan. First and foremost, I think it's important that Ukraine and Taiwan are fundamentally different. They're different histories, cultures, and backgrounds. That being said, it's important to understand what possibly could be applied. All of the statements coming out from President Xi Jinping demonstrate a man who is in a haste. The reality is that President Xi wants to do something that no other Chinese leader has ever done, and that is to be able to reunite China with Taiwan. And I think one of the things that's driving this is that when I speak to the elite of China, when I speak to the next generations of leaders that will assume and lead China long after President Xi and his generation are long gone, they're not talking about Taiwan and reclaiming Taiwan. They're talking about things like investing in various economic markets and investing in their livelihoods and their families. And I think President Xi gets this, and he understands that the newer generation will never ever have the same ideological fervor for taking Taiwan back into the mainland, even by force. And so that's why I think he is really so focused on being able to craft a narrative which in many ways argues for Taiwan to come back to the mainland China, even if force is utilized. And so I think that is a very critical point to understand. With that, I know we've gone through a lot and would love to take questions from the audience. You can either type questions in the audience. You can type questions directly into the chat, and would be keen to engage in a great dialogue. I know that there is so much talent and expertise in this room, so I hope this is more of a dialogue. First question from Dave Nelson. She wants Taiwan, but younger proper do not. Absolutely. I think what you're finding right now is there's a huge gap between the older generation, those who have, similar ideology, and the younger generation who are growing up and they've always seen, Dave, a Taiwan that has been economically and politically separate and in many ways independent from mainland China. It's almost, think of it, equating it to, those in Britain who, those in India who post-colonialism, who have always tasted a free and open, and free India. And so in the same way, you have this huge gap of the younger generation in mainland China who are growing up, particularly the younger generation, these millennials, if you will call it. And in many ways, reclaiming Taiwan is not a key and core strategic imperative. I mean, that's just the reality. When I speak to taxi drivers in mainland China, both at various structures, at various age levels, I mean, the reality is that Taiwan or bringing Taiwan back into mainland China is not a real core strategic imperative. Now, I'll also say a point a little bit about what's going on in Taiwan, both for young and the older generation. I'm married to a Taiwanese, and so I live this out daily. My mother-in-law, if you were to ask her, does she have any, what does she feel about Taiwan being reunited with the mainland? It's not a problem for her. She said, we would just be paying tax
not to a Taiwanese government, we'd be paying tax to a mainland China government. Now it's important to understand that my parents, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law are from the KMT, the Kuomintang, and they historically have stronger ties to mainland China. But from her perspective, she does not see a fundamental, she doesn't have a real problem with Taiwan being part of mainland China at some point in the future. Now, if you were to ask the younger generation in Taiwan, the way that they are perceiving the mainland China, the media, the way that they are learning and developing, information about mainland China is very, very different. They have a very distinct identity from mainland China, and the younger generation in Taiwan will continue to have a very, very more of an independent type stance with respect to independence. Question, so thank you very much, Dave, for the question. Second question from Josephine Chen. Will she ever relinquish power in his lifetime? Great question. So you will see that President Xi abolished term limits on his term, and this is very, very significant for a number of reasons. Number one, President Xi Jinping came to power in 2012. He's been in power for roughly 10 years. And when you look at the historical structure that when you look at, Chairman Mao Zedong and you look at Deng Xiaoping put in place term limits because they did not want to see a place where there was straight chaos for who would then rule China, that there would be infighting for fighting over the next realms of power. And I think it's important when you compare, there's so many parallels between President Xi Jinping and Chairman Mao in terms of ideology, in terms of power and style. I think they're very fundamentally different. Chairman Mao had no qualms with essentially ripping apart the Chinese Communist Party when it did not suit its interests. President Xi is very different. He wants to work through the bureaucracy, he wants to work through the party, and he wants to work through various institutions because he feels that they can best craft his political narrative. And I think that's very important. Will he ever relinquish power in his lifetime? I sincerely doubt it, because he is at a place where he has amassed more power than any political leader, including Chairman Mao. And I think that is a very dangerous element with no successor in sight. Next question is from Jean Rosau. To what degree does Russia's invasion of Ukraine inform China and its interest in Taiwan? It's a great question, Jean, and it's something that I've thought of a lot. When you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and to what extent does this inform China's interest in Taiwan? I think it's critically important. If you were President Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, and you are watching what's unfolding right now in Ukraine, what is going through your mind? I'll tell you, if I was President Tsai Ing-wen, what's going through my mind is, wow, I'm feeling pretty emboldened that if China were to ever attack Taiwan, similar to how Russia has invaded Ukraine, to see how the United States and other Western allies has rallied around and isolated China, I'm feeling a sense, to a certain degree, of being emboldened, that and feeling a sense of I don't know, secure is the right word, but if you look at what President Tsai Ing-wen is saying right now, she is arguing for stronger economic, political, and social relations with the United States. You saw Taiwan approve the largest military package from the United States. You saw last week ex-diplomats from the United States, in particular a number of my dear friends, travel to Taiwan and argue that Taiwan needs to dramatically increase its military defensive capabilities vis-a-vis mainland China. And I think the United States is making that point very, very clearly. If you are President Xi, watching what is unfolding right now with Russia's invasion in Ukraine. I think you are having a bit of trepidation in terms of what could unfold if China were to think about a similar type invasion in Ukraine. And also, I would argue that for the Taiwanese, whether or not they would fight the same way the Ukrainians would fight to defend their homeland is something that President Tsai is thinking about significantly right now. And how do you encourage and inculcate a kind of system and culture whereby Taiwanese would defend the island the same way Ukrainians would defend, the same way that Ukrainians are defending their country right now. If you are President Xi right now, I think you are kind of mixed. This is not something that is giving you a great sense of confidence vis-a-vis Taiwan right now. You have the issue of Taiwan greatly being more internationalized, with Japan coming out for the first time saying, NATO, why don't Japan and NATO coordinate some kind of nuclear collaboration? That is specifically aimed at China. And China is hearing these remarks, and it is deeply troubling to them. I think to your other point, Gene, I think with respect to Taiwan, Taiwan is also saying, how can they better explore other types of military cooperation with other like-minded members, whether that be NATO and elsewhere. They are redefining a type of military architecture that has never been, I mean, they're exploring opportunities and opportunities that have never been explored before, given what is currently playing out in Ukraine. So I think this is really important to watch. And I think institutions like the Quad, in which Japan and Australia, UK, and India are developing a multilateral framework that could potentially be utilized against China, is something that I think we should be watching for and how that develops in the future. ANKUS, the way Australia, UK, and the United States are developing nuclear technology is also something that we should be looking closely at, and how that applies to something that could pretend vis-a-vis Taiwan. Next question comes from Nick Isbranson, and he asks, the last 2 years have shown us the weakness of US being so reliant on China, economically, in terms of supply chains, medicine, medical supplies, etc. Recognizing an immediate decoupling would be destabilizing. Why not incentivize the world to increase manufacturing elsewhere, ideally the United States, anywhere but China? So Nick, absolutely. And I think that if you look at a number of initiatives that are being played out by the Biden administration, such as the Build Back Better program, you are seeing earmarks of billions of dollars for semiconductor chips being restored back to the United States. There are currently 2 legislations in the United States that are being debated right now in Congress, USA CHIPS. Intel has also made it very clear that they are going to open a new plant in Ohio, where they will be processing more chips there. So I think that that is clearly initiatives that are front and center in front of US policymakers. And your point about medical supplies as well, with respect to masks and a variety of other things. But I think in terms of maintaining our economic competitive edge, semiconductor chips is clearly the front and center in terms of policymakers. So absolutely, I would agree with your point on that. Next question from my colleague Pengyu Lu. What are the implications of Ukraine and Russia conflict on midterm elections in the US and elections in China? Great question, Pengyu. So I'll start with midterm elections. And I think that, if you look at history, historically, when you have either a Republican Party that controls both the House and the Senate, midterm elections, typically you either see the House going to a Democratic Party or vice versa. We have checks and balances in the US political structure to prevent any one party from having too much power. And I think it is widely noted that, within the Biden administration that, midterm elections, he's probably set to not fare too well with probably, losing the House. I will say that the way that the Biden administration has formulated its U.S. foreign policy with respect to Ukraine has won, high marks from both Republicans and Democrats. I think that, and I think that will play a factor in midterm elections. To what extent, I think it's too early to tell. In terms of how does this, the implications of Ukraine and Russia on elections in China, or I think what you're primarily referring to is the Arshada, the 20th plenary session that we just saw play out in March, just recently. And I think what you're seeing play out with policy there is what's referred to as a self-strengthening movement, particularly with Xi trying to rally both his base as well as the broader standing political bureau around its policies. It's important to understand that right now, President Xi is probably weaker than he has ever historically been, given that COVID cases are rising. So he's being criticized on his what we call the zero COVID policy. Number one, you're also seeing voices coming out criticizing his policy on criticizing his policy on Deng Xiaoping and the huge economic policies that have moved China to where it is today. There was a great piece in today's Wall Street Journal that argued that Premier Zhu Rongji has actually been one of the loudest people who have criticized President Xi's policies in terms of backsliding on liberalization of economic reforms. And that's very important to understand because, President Xi has amassed an important, as I mentioned, he's probably the most powerful political figure that we've had ever. And for now, for the first time, we're now hearing people come out subtly or not so subtly criticizing some of his policies, I think are very important. So, how he continues to maintain policy going forward, can he deliver on, 5.5% GDP growth in the future? And if he cannot deliver, that will have critical implications for him being able to further consolidate his power in the future. Robert Larrick, as you bring up, aren't there better ways of relating than mutually destructive nationalistic competition and force and joint military exercises with Russia? Because many are unhappy, particularly with U.S. Western human rights and its UN establishment norms. Bob Larrick, who continues to work on meaningful UN renewal from 50th to 77th anniversary, isn't it about time? So as I understand this question, I think that, there are many who criticize China's human rights record. I think in particular, what has transpired with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, what is currently transpired in Hong Kong. There's been a lot of controversy over how China has currently fared out on its human rights record, and what the U.S. administration and what other allies are doing to put more pressure for China to be held to stronger human rights, U.S. human rights record. I think at the end of the day, to the degree possible, I think that the administration and other countries such as Australia, the UK, they are voicing stronger opposition to what is going on with respect to the Uyghurs and what is respecting to Hong Kong. And I think that will continue to, I think you will see more voices and continued criticism going forward in the future. Other questions? I will go ahead and take one from Nancy. Okay, another one. Let me just go down over here. Okay. A question from Nancy Duff. Will the One Belt, One Road initiative negatively impact U.S. transnational trade in the future? Great question, Nancy. I had the privilege of being friends and knowing under the Trump administration the key U.S. representative to the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And when we would speak, and we would text, one of the questions I and many others would ask him is, does the United States, and U.S. businesses, do they have a role? Can they engage in China's Belt and Road Initiative? Can they benefit or reap the fruits from China's Belt and Road Initiative? And according to one business person, I'll never forget one of the quotes he said was that, the reality is that the Belt and Road Initiative, by and large, will benefit large Chinese state-owned enterprises, and they will benefit other countries that are within and more closely aligned to China's Belt and Road Initiative. When you see China developing memorandums of understanding with countries like Trinidad, countries like Peru, within the Western Hemisphere, I mentioned the largest bridge that is being constructed in Jamaica. How do American businesses and Western businesses engage and benefit from these? And I think it's very difficult when you look at the various structure for, just look at arbitration, right? If you are a company and you are engaged in a contract with the Belt and Road and you have a dispute, will you have the access to the requisite arbitration standards that you would face in the West or in the United States? I think that's a key and important consideration. Are you able to even understand or bid effectively on RFPs that are coming out for the Belt and Road? There's no list that I or others are aware of. So there's a lot of controversy of how best US and Western firms can actually engage effectively on the Belt and Road Initiative. I think one great example is, during the Trump administration, when Trump first went to China, GE signed a very important initiative with a local company in China to produce best practices and jointly develop clean energy technologies. I think this is a great first step, and I think we need more initiatives like this going forward. Another question that speaks to for Gene. Can you shed light on the China-North Korea relationship? Great question, Gene, and it's something that I followed very closely when I was a research associate at the Council on Foreign Relations. We did a bipartisan task force report entitled The North Korean Nuclear Challenge. And one of the things that I took away from working almost 9 months on this project is that when you look at North Korea and the fact that 70% of its oil and energy needs comes from China, China has huge fundamental economic leverage vis-a-vis North Korea. And so any type of multilateral framework in which US, Seoul, South Korea engages with North Korea, China will and must be a part of in terms of economic leverage. When China wants to send a very clear signal to North Korea to tone down the launching of missiles, all it has to do is slightly turn off some of the oil exports, and North Korea kind of gets the message. And you see this particularly when you see the Kim Jong-un and when you see President Xi meet at meetings. There is a clear difference in terms of kind of who is more important in this relationship. Particularly the way that he bows, particularly the way that Kim Jong-un refers to President Xi. I think it's very important to understand the power dynamics in that relationship, particularly as it refers to economic as well as political leverage. Another great question from Nick. What is the trade-off with the Belt and Road initiative?
Yes, they are creating infrastructure for developing countries, but how much of it is predatory practices with unrealistic payment plans that the Chinese government knows will inevitably end up with owning strategic infrastructure around the world? Okay, so this is a great question, and it's something that I spent a lot of time researching and currently working on. I think it's important to understand that the Belt and Road Initiative means different things to different people. It's really important you understand that concept. When we talk about China's Belt and Road Initiative, there is no one overarching strategy. There is no one, and there are various institutions within China and banks that coordinate and that are engaged. It's kind of like the wild west in terms of financing various infrastructure projects, but there is no one kind of like institution that is coordinating or that says that, this is kind of my this is my turf, and if there's any Belt and Road initiatives, you have to go through the NDRC, or you have to go through the People's Bank of China. So that's very important to understand, number one. Number two, I think it's also really important to understand that while there are some very clear examples where China's lending has been predatory, many people specifically point to the Belt and Road Initiative port in Sri Lanka, in which the essentially the Sri Lankan government could not repay back the loan, and as a result, China was able to lease the land for something like 50 years. That, by and large, is an isolated incident. The vast majority of cases that we have data for do not utilize the Belt and Road Initiative and the lending project in Sri Lanka as what we refer to as a systemic, occurrence in a variety of other developing economies. That's what the data tells us. So I think it's important to understand that. But that being the case, there is clearly this notion that China has an economic model that it is exporting to a variety of developing economies. And this model includes utilizing Chinese labor. We saw this particularly clearly in a number of African countries where China will export its labor, it's kind of will lend, and then all of a sudden, where do the locals benefit from this arrangement? So particularly the African Union has raised these issues with China, and now they are getting better negotiations with respect to Belt and Road projects, from what I hear from officials at the highest level. Another question from Joanna. Will the wolf warrior diplomatic style likely continue, or do you see a moderation in approach towards the US? Great question, Joanna. I think in many ways, the wolf warrior diploma and diplomatic style really backfired on China. Somewhat, after the, what we call mass diplomacy, after COVID, erupted, and there were many concerns and allegations on where COVID came from and how the handling of COVID with China. You saw China engage on this, what we call mass diplomacy, giving vaccines to a variety of countries in the developing community. And then they went on what we would refer to as wolf warrior diplomacy, really arguing in a very, sharp and abrasive style that, COVID did not come from China, but in fact, originated from Europe. But I think what you found after, 6 months plus of this wolf warrior diplomacy, a number of diplomats had to actually pull President Xi aside and say, this policy is not working. It has significantly damaged the international image and reputation of China, and they essentially did an about face. They essentially discontinued this wolf warrior diplomacy and tried to to demonstrate more of China aiming for China to be portrayed in a better light and utilizing more of a diplomatic style. So I think that is an important lesson that was learned in many ways the hard way. That being said, I know it's 6:38, so I will defer to my esteemed host, Jean, and also Jessica, if we would like to continue. I'm happy to take a few more questions, or if you want to, call it here, I'm totally fine either way.
Would you be willing, Earl, to entertain questions sent to you after we conclude our session this night?
Yes, absolutely. And because Jessica did such an exceptional job of working on this event, I would have to answer the question that she posed, if that's all right with you, Gene.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so Jessica, your exceptional question is, how would you characterize the dialogue between the U.S. and China today? How is the level of trust, the ease of communication, the risk of miscommunication? What is going right versus where or how could it be improved? Exceptional questions, Jessica. I would say that if you look at the current dynamics between the United States and China, I think that there are more challenges than opportunities. And I would frame that by looking at how we are engaging both economically, politically, and socially. Just take foreign exchanges, for example. The United States sends roughly 10,000 American students to study in China every year. And this number has been declining over the last 2 years. In turn, China sends 290,000 Chinese students to study in the United States. That is a fundamental misgap that needs to be corrected. I think that when Chinese students come to the United States, oftentimes they are from a variety of different backgrounds. You have the elite of the elite, like President Xi's daughter, who studied at Harvard. And I think these individuals will continue to come to institutions like Harvard and other institutions in the West. But I think it's critically important to understand that, when we make it harder for Chinese students to study in the United States, we do a huge disservice to these students. We also do a huge disservice to American students that are trying to study abroad in China. And when policy, when the United States and China cannot cooperate, effectively, and we make it harder for these students to study abroad in China, we do a huge disservice to these students who come back with very important knowledge, know-how, and understanding of how China and our precious global community operate. The United States and China are going through, an important, the United States is going through, we've seen an interesting race, reckoning with George Floyd and a variety of other issues that have happened. And, a friend and mentor pointed out to me that, some of the anti-Asian hate has come from a number of members from the African-American community and other groups. And when my mentor shared, wouldn't it be great if by having more Americans from all spectrums and all cultures, in groups, in multi-ethnic groups from the United States study abroad in China, could that not help change some of the perceptions of how these people view Chinese and other Asian in the Asian community? And I think it would be viewed positively in that sense. For your question, what is the level of trust? I think the level of trust right now is extremely low. And I think forums like this help to improve the level of trust, both at a very grassroots level. But when you educate people from this group and from all other spectrums of life and centers of influence, I think that this helps to improve trust, in a variety of different, categories. And so I'm extremely thankful for organizations like the World Affairs Forum that help to produce and promote more trust in the United States and China.
And Earl, I can say on behalf of the World Affairs Forum that we're extremely grateful to you for educating us this evening on a wide range of topics. I think that we're in a better position to build that trust than we were prior to this evening's conversation. So I can't thank you enough, Earl. You've done a great job this evening, and we hope to see you again at some point in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.